You're listening to the Fairfax Bible Church Discipleship Podcast, where we aim to help our church think biblically and grow as disciples who love Christ and live sent for His glory. For more information about our church, visit www.fairfaxbible.org or follow us on social media.
All right, looks like we're up and running. Well, hello, everyone. Welcome to the Fairfax Bible Church Discipleship Podcast. My name is Matt Rumbaugh, and I'm delighted to be here today with not only my dear friend, but one of my heroes. This is Lilia Oberman. Lilia is the coolest person in our church, and I'm so delighted that we have the chance to share her story with you today. Some of you know Lilia. Some of you may not have had the opportunity to meet her. Many of you have been to her house and had tea and lunch, delectables from the land of the Philippines. What you might not know is Lilia just published a book. Here's what it looks like. It's called Lilia, My Life in the Hands of the Maker. And so Lilia, I've heard from a couple people who said that they read your book in one day. It actually took me 2 days. But many people have said that once they start it, they cannot stop. Your story is not only inspiring and delightful, but it is spellbinding just to hear what God has brought you through and how you arrived here. So first things first, thank you for sharing your time with us today. I'm really delighted that we get the chance to do this.
I'm a little nervous, but thank you for even taking this time. When I started writing, I thought, what am I doing? I cannot do this. But through the encouragement of our pastor, who said, you remember about couple of years ago, where he said, write a story, 100 stories of how God is working in your life.
Yes.
And I did like a 2-3 paragraph story, but from there, it's like I was prompted by the Lord to say, Lilia, you have more than that. You can write. And I said, no, Lord, I cannot.
Well, I remember being in a small group with you for a season, and whatever it is we would be talking about, you would have a killer story. And I was like, Lily, you've got all of these. What have you written these down? Are you writing these down? We need these. Yeah. And I remember having those conversations with you.
Right. And you're one of those who encouraged me, kept saying, write your story. And I said, should I? Anyway, we need to encourage each other to move on. Sometimes some people need a push.
Yeah.
And if we see that there's something good, we need to push our brothers and sisters in the Lord in the right direction.
Yeah. Well, let's get into a little bit. So you are from the Philippines. You were born there, and that's where your family is from. Most of your family is now here in the United States, and so that's a part of your journey. But tell us about growing up in the Philippines. I know that an important part of your story is that the family that you were born into, not believers when you were born. So an important part of your story is your parents coming to understand who Jesus is and what he has done for us. And that had a big effect in your family. So I'd love to hear that story.
Okay. So like most Filipinos of my generation, we are nominal Roman Catholics because the Philippines was found by Magellan, sent by the Queen of Spain. So they brought the Roman Catholic Church to the Philippines. So almost all Filipinos, 98% at the time, were Roman Catholics. And so my parents too, they would observe the holidays and did things that are socially acceptable, but they really did not have any relationship. And at one point, somebody who's a friend of the family came to have his suit made by my father. My father is a tailor, and it so happened that he lived in the country and stayed with us for a while to have his suit made. During that time, he shared the message with my father, and my father came from a political family in the Philippines, and he had seen the effect of the politics and things that had affected his family. So of all things, when he heard that verse in, I think it's in Deuteronomy that says the sins of the father will be visited on the children to the third and fourth generation. He got scared and he said, I don't want my kids to inherit that. And that's what touched him to say, I want to have a different life to give to my children. So my father coming to know the Lord allowed us as Roman Catholics to go a different direction. And he came to a point where he received the Lord Jesus. And all of us, 7 children, were baptized in the Presbyterian Church in the Philippines.
Mhm.
That's very unusual.
Yeah.
But we were just following him. And then because of that, several years later, the three first daughters of my father went to a summer camp. That's a whole different story.
Yeah.
We went to a Baptist camp, and that's where I had my own personal encounter to what it means to know Jesus as my Lord.
Yeah. The other thing that I really loved in the book is how in the early days of your parents being believers, there was not an organized church in your town, and so your father's tailor shop was essentially your church. And
Yeah.
it may be hard for people to understand, so we can keep this a little bit brief. But explain a little bit about what that was like. The place where you sleep, you
I
sleep
know.
there at night, but then the next morning it's a Sunday school class. It's a strange story, but
It
explain
is.
to people, what was that like? Yeah.
It's very remarkable because the tailor shop was on the first floor. We lived on the second floor where the bedroom. Anyway, every day my father worked hard. And then when he came to know the Lord, our tailor shop was closed on Sunday. So we knew something was happening. Why would he close the shop on the busiest day? And what is also remarkable is there were 3 people who visited us every week for 3 years from the church to follow up what happened to my dad. And so from there they said, okay, we need to have a place for them to worship. There were no Christian church in our neighborhood. So they opened Sunday morning. They would have the service at the tailor shop, and we were all, you can imagine, it's a whole congregation, 7 children, my father, mother, the tailors in the tailor shop. And we were thinking, what are we doing? We have to close our eyes when we pray. And I remember distinctly some people were throwing stones at our house because they were thinking, what's going on in that house? They now have prayer. They could hear us sing, but that's amazing. That's where it started.
Yeah. Yeah. So the book gives us more detail, obviously. So people go get the book, and we'll tell you more
Yes.
about that at the end here. But then you get older, and slightly different than the culture in the Philippines. But it was important to you and to your family that you get an education. You developed an interest in the medical field. And so you had the opportunity to go to university there in the Philippines, but then to pursue your education further, you decided to come to the United States. And that part of the book is really beautiful, just about the struggle that was. And today that's it's certainly not an easy flight, but it's a relatively straightforward experience. You get on an airplane, you spend a few hours in the air, then you land in the United States. That was not the case for you. So it was a little longer journey. So and I know that even today, one of the things that you really focus on is people who are in the United States for the first time. That's an important value for you, and you spend a lot of time with people who are in this country for the first time to help them learn English and customs and things like that. But I'd love to hear, what was your experience the first time that you came to the United States? What were you doing, and then what were some of the things that you learned and adjustments you had to make?
Okay, just like any transition, it was like new experience. It was like a honeymoon. I was more excited about being able to come to the United States. And I did not even worry. I did not even think that it was going to be hard. But yes, the number one shock was the weather.
Now, when you came to the United States from the Philippines obviously is a tropical climate, and you went to school in Wisconsin.
Michigan.
Oh, Michigan. That's right. Sorry, Michigan. And yeah,
Ann
those are
Arbor,
very
Michigan.
different places.
Oh my goodness. I thought I had the warmest jacket. My father made me a suit of corduroy, and I thought that was, if I wore that in the Philippines, I would be sweating, you know. And I wore that coming to Michigan, Ann Arbor, Michigan. I arrived in September. But I landed in San Francisco. But anyway, the weather, the other thing was the people. Everybody was big. And then they spoke English that I thought I spoke English. I was bilingual, you know,
Mhm.
in the Philippines, but I did not pronounce the words as you would speak. Even now, you can tell that I'm Filipino.
Right.
The food, I missed rice. Normally eat rice 3 times a day. But and I was so impressed with the abundance of food that within the first 3 months I gained 25 pounds, if
Oh,
you can
goodness.
imagine.
Wow.
Yeah, 25 pounds added to my 78 pounds. I was 78 pounds when I came to the US. So it's the food, the weather, the people, the language. But the one thing that I was really shocked was coming to America. I thought everybody was Christian because the only Americans I met in the Philippines were missionaries and Christians. And here I was in a intern's home, and I was the only one who want to go to church on Sunday. And I had to walk a long ways to go to the one church, Presbyterian church that I
Mhm.
knew.
Yep.
So I that was a big adjustment.
Wow. So your first time in America, you were here for a couple years, working on a degree in the medical field, nutrition, right? You became
Right.
a
I was
nutrition.
doing what they call a dietetic internship. After
Okay.
4 years, you need to do that to be certified, to be a registered dietitian. Yeah. Mhm.
And so along the way, you struck up a relationship with a young man and got pretty serious. And it had there was a result of that that you did not anticipate, and that changed your life. It was a big turning point in
Yes,
your life.
yes.
So yeah, I don't want to say anymore. You tell us the story here.
Okay, so I was on what they call a visitor's visa. So in 2 years, I had to come back to the to the Philippines. But in the meantime, like you said, I met this young man, and during that time also most of my Filipino friends have left the area, so I didn't have a group of close fellowship. I was not in a church, so this young man was the only one who would listen to me when in talking about problems. And I had to go back to the Philippines because of my visa problem, or get a student visa. I was already enrolled in the School of Public Health, but it was like a catch 22. I needed to have proof that I was a student. I needed to have proof that my visa was okay. It was a very difficult time. And there was no one to counsel me during that time, except I had a friend who would listen.
Mhm.
And this friend was Mahendra. And to make a long story short, this was a very hard chapter for me to write.
Yes.
We fell in love, and I was 23 years old. And yes, I got pregnant. And my decision was, what do I do with this? Do I go back to the Philippines and be embarrassed, and or go to I could have gone to Canada, because most of my friends who needed to have their visa extended went to Canada and were employed there. But in the meantime, I was carrying a baby. What do I do?
Yeah.
I was just, I don't, in fact, now as I think about it, how did I survive that time?
Yeah.
How did I make the right decision? And I'm so glad, and I have to say this, that it was not legal to have an abortion during that time. That would have been my first choice,
Mhm.
because I was in a position where I needed to proceed with my training or go back to the Philippines without being embarrassed. During my generation, that is like the ultimate of wrong thing that you could do.
Mm-hmm.
Have a baby when you are not married.
Mm-hmm.
And what shame that would bring to my parents. So I was not only thinking of myself. So the shame was so big
Yeah.
compared to, I did not know that that was something that was against the Lord's will for me. During the whole time I was in Ann Arbor, I did not have any teaching in the word, no fellowship. So I was very far removed from what it means to know the Lord.
Mm-hmm.
But I want to emphasize it must be the Lord's faithfulness to me and answer to prayers of my loved ones that made me the right decision, made me make the right decision
Yeah.
to go back to the Philippines.
It is a gut-wrenching part of the book, into just how you're a young woman caught between your time in the United States and the Philippines. The idea of the honor shame culture that's
Yes.
not as strong in the United States, but is obviously very influential in the Philippines and many parts of the world, even today.
Yeah.
And so the agony of you carrying the need to make that decision really, really comes through in the book.
I hope so. I hope so. Because even as I think about it, even now, whatever decision I make, it affects my whole family. Now it's not my parents, but it's my children, my grandchildren, and great grandchildren.
Yeah,
And that's the reason, in fact, for the book. So I think the family is very important, that we all have to realize we are not an island. Lilia is not just making a decision for herself, but it's for who I will affect in my family line, so
yeah.
to speak.
Yeah. Now, one of the things you say in the book is, you don't say it in these words, but one of the things that you point out is when your son David was born,
Uh-huh.
that he came with so much joy, struggle for sure, and we'll talk
Yeah.
about that here in a minute, but so much joy that you cannot imagine life without him, and the joy that he brought into your life and that the Lord used him. Like if you'd understand that even then, like maybe that decision wouldn't have been more of a struggle. Like of course David is going
Yeah,
to be
yeah.
part of your life, and then
Mhm.
and your children and your great grandchildren and all of that. But that was one of those things, like so I know the toughness of the decision really comes through, but the joy of that really comes through in
Yeah.
the book as well.
The joy and how it has shaped my life. I think that is the most defining moment for me, not as a nutritionist, not as whatever I have accomplished, getting my master's degree and all that, but being a single mother has really been the defining moment for me. And what I mean, he's 60 years old now, my son,
Mhm.
and just reviewing how the Lord has really sent him as a blessing. It's Psalm 121, children are a gift from the Lord. And what was I doing? I mean, now I can look back and say that I was going to reject this gift that God gave to me, that even in my sin during that time, the Lord still said, I'm going to bless you, Lilia. I'm going to give you a baby. Wow. I mean, looking back, that's what I can say now, but I didn't know at the time.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and so we're fast forwarding through some parts of your story. There is an amazing episode where you end up in Guam for a couple years,
Yeah, yeah.
which is amazing. And then you come back to the United States. You start in North Carolina, eventually end up here in Northern Virginia. You were on staff at Children's Hospital in DC for many, many years. Almost all of that as a single mother. In fact, all of that period as a single
As a
mother.
single mom.
Um, yeah, and yet that story is remarkable because your focus was not on the struggle. Your focus was on joyful obedience in that time. I'm not trying to put words in your mouth, but that was one of my takeaways
Yeah,
from
yeah.
that. What was that experience like? What was, it's easy to look back now and sort of simplify it, but it must have been incredibly challenging. And yet it seemed to be a season of joy for you.
Right. It's interesting because not interesting, but it's amazing. Amazing. I will use that word because we were prepared. our time on Guam was preparation time for us because we learned about who God is and what He is doing in our lives. And when He calls us to do something, He prepares us. So coming to Northern Virginia as a single mom, that's amazing. I just got a letter from yesterday. It's
Oh my goodness.
handwritten, and
Yes.
it's 4 pages
Wow.
from a woman who was in one of my Sunday school class 25 years, 30 years ago, who thanked me for my son. And he says, I was always amazed that David, a teenager, would want to take Alan, my 7-year-old boy, to play basketball outside. What teen would want to play with a 7-year-old? I mean, she was just telling me how the Lord had used us in her life. I had forgotten about that. And it's because as we were growing up, David and we always said, I would tell David, this is being a single mom. I didn't use that word. They would say that a boy growing up with a single mom is handicapped or something like that. I said, no, what we need to focus on is the Lord brought us this so we can help other mothers who are raising children without a father.
Mm-hmm.
And so he had always talked about that way. So while he was watching a TV show one day, seeing this Big Brother program, he came up to me. He was just a teenager. He said, Mom, how can I be a big brother to somebody? Who is that? And so Alan was one of them.
Mm-hmm.
But the Lord had put that in our heart. We were not thinking of we were victims. We were victors because Christ was in our lives.
Yeah.
And it's because we learned that when we were on Guam for 2 years, we were in the Word of God. We were nurtured. That's a very significant part of my life.
Yes.
Yeah, I would not have survived coming back and getting my graduate degree without knowing the Lord as I did.
Yeah. Your faithfulness to him and certainly his faithfulness to you is evident all throughout that chapter or many chapters, right? Let me stop here and ask you. I think even then, a single mom in a church is a bit of an outlier.
Right.
And I know that you talked about kind of feeling a little bit like you were not a black sheep or something like that, but most other families with children, there's a mom and a dad. You're just a mom.
Mhm.
What did your church do to make you feel supported, included? And I'm asking that so that we might learn, so that as single
Yes.
moms might come to our church, what are things that we can do to support them and make sure that they feel included?
Right. So I think the difference between that's why I'm in America rather than in the Philippines.
Mm-hmm.
If I was in the Philippines, even in a Christian church in the Philippines, I would have been like marked as a single mother.
Right.
And I would already have an identity as a single mom.
Yeah.
Even though here at the church where we went, nobody asked me, in fact, where David's father is. And they just accepted me for who I am. But I was also, that's the gift from the Lord. I was not shy or embarrassed. I got involved in whatever program was involved. So it takes two. The church was welcoming, accepted me. And in fact, one of the things that the pastor's wife at the time invited me in a training program for missionary wives. So there were, I mentioned that to how we could be trained in the Word of God to help others.
Mm-hmm.
So one of the things is to identify and use the people's gifts and don't identify me as a single mom.
So to learn more about that, people, you have to buy the book. The next season, though, is when you worked at Children's Hospital. You worked under a man, Dr. Rowe.
Yes, yes.
And so there was an interesting he was your boss or your boss's boss. He was an authority
He
figure,
was my boss.
and
He
yet
left
you
me.
struck up at first a friendship, a very good working relationship that cultivated into a friendship that ultimately cultivated into something else. And that
Something
it's an
else.
unusual story, and I'd love to share that with the people.
Okay, something else. He was my boss. I was deathly scared of him. He hired me. He's a doctor, uh, and but there was chemistry. I mean, I was attracted. I mean, this man was. I cannot describe it. I mean, and he was also attracted to me. So he would show signs, and my coworker says, "Oh, Doctor O likes you." I said, "No, he does not."
Well, I have to say, Lilia, there are some pictures in the book here. You are quite a dish. I can't say he was wrong for being attracted to you.
No. Anyway, so that part where he came in the book, where he came to my office, was talking about regular meeting that was happening, and he was saying, "Are you going to the meeting in?" I think it was out of town, and we were talking about this, and I said, "Now, do you know that I have?" I don't know how old David was, a young boy. I have a son that I need to find a babysitter for. And he turned beet red. And I said, "Oh, what did I miss?" And actually, he said, he was actually asking me out on a date. He changed. He changed the topic from the business, are you going to the meeting, to would you go out with me on a date? And I was so out of it. I mean, but he was very indirect, and I did not understand
Yeah.
that, speaking of culture. And so from that first time, and we went out on a date, and my sister by that time was here in Northern Virginia already, and they checked him out before I went out. On a very cold morning, we saw Fiddler on the Roof in a
Wow.
yeah, in a theater in Washington D.C. And I was of course excited. My heart was thumping like a teenager. And that started, but then because he was my boss, and also I did not have the confidence that he knew Jesus as I did.
Right.
I was very careful. I was very guarded in our relationship. I could not show my affection. I was not free. And I'm glad that I had that guard.
Yeah, and one of the things I was really struck by in the book is you were pretty honest with David about that experience. And David was honest with you about his feelings about that experience.
Yes, yes. Well, that is probably one of God's gift. My son, as growing up, because single parent, we were here by ourselves. We had a very close relationship.
Mhm.
So there was nothing hidden. Like, if he didn't feel good in school, he would tell me. If I had a hard day at work, I would tell him.
Mhm.
So we were just walking along. But the other thing is, he was growing in his faith, in his own
Yes.
faith as a teenager. He was part of a very good youth group. In fact, they belong to the FBI, and that's coined faithful Bible investigators.
I love that.
FBI, I know. And
I
so,
laughed when I read that part of the book. I laughed because I could just hear your voice like explaining that. So yeah, I
yeah,
giggled.
yeah,
I giggled at that point. Yeah.
I know. And he would always check me. Why is Dr. O coming to the house? He does not know the Lord. I mean, and how do you explain that?
Yeah. Yeah. So through some stops and starts and some ups and downs, you two eventually decide to get married. And he actually moved into your house in Fairfax. And so if you would go to Lilia's house now and see the birds and the butterflies and the decorations, that is a legacy of your time with Dr. O, because he was
Yes,
a big
yes,
nature lover.
yes.
And he had a cabin out in the mountains that he spent time in and really enjoyed. And Yeah, so it's a way for Dr. O, even though he's not part of our church, but it's a way for us to get to know him a little.
Get to know him.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I'm ahead of things a little bit because he actually, after you'd been married for some time, you realized that he was very sick, and you were a caretaker for him, and he eventually passed away, and that was a formative experience for you as well. So can you share a little bit about that?
Yes. Actually, before back up a little bit.
Yeah.
Before that, my parents also, who were in their 90s, um, moved in with me. So when I got married, Dr. O married me and my parents. There were three
Yes.
of us in the house. Again, culture. So I was prepared to take care of Dr. O. And I'm impressed always how the Lord prepares us when He calls us to a difficult task. I was used to already what to see, and my father died first, and then my mother in my care.
Mhm.
So when Bill's Parkinson got to the fourth stage Parkinson, latter days, I was able to meet that. How would I say, caring, being a caretaker.
Yes.
Yeah. Um, he being a doctor also, he knew what was going on with his body, but this also is to me grace from the Lord when I realized here's a doctor who wanted me to be this caretaker for him. Like he did not want any of the people at the hospital do anything with him without letting me know.
Yeah.
Yeah, without consulting with me. And he was in hospice care for 1 year, actually, 6 months in my house, then 6 months at Millie's home. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a beautiful story. And so, for someone like I've been married 20 years now, and other people in our church are relatively newly married. When you talk about for better, for worse, or for sickness, or for health, that you and Bill, Dr. O, were an example of that. And the tenderness of that part of the book was very, very moving to me, Lilia. So
Yeah, but I want to say though that he was a gift because before his Parkinson's was so bad already, preventing us from traveling, he took me on travels every year. So we took 6 very beautiful elder hostel travel. I wouldn't say around the world, but because of his interest in nature, we went to Costa Rica, we went to Mexico where we saw the monarch butterflies,
yeah,
we went to the Pyrenees. I mean, it was just something that is my heart's desire. And this is where I see where the Lord is blessing me, where it says, delight yourself in the Lord and he will give you the desires of your heart.
yeah,
That was a gift.
yeah.
Before, I mean, taking care of him was not an issue at all with me.
Right. Yeah. So Dr. O passes away in 2012, and not long afterward, you show up at what was then Harvest Bible Chapel, Fairfax. We've since renamed Fairfax Bible Church, and I met you right about that time. You joined the small group that I was part of, that I eventually led. It's been here in our home for many years, and
Yes.
very quickly, Lilia, you became an important part of my family, an important figure, somebody whose counsel we trusted, whose company we valued, who's just somebody who just meant a lot to us. That was really special. Now I have to say, Lilia, one of the things that people, when they walk into our church, even now, they look around and be like, "Whoa, you are a very young church," and so you're 84 years old, right? And yet I joke with people that you're actually the youngest person in our church. So I guess the plainest way to say this is, what in the world? Why are you part of our church, Lilia?
Well, this is real in terms of God put me there. I cannot, it's really for me, what am I doing here? I mean, I cannot relate to all these millennials and this and the hymns and the songs they're singing, I don't know the tunes, I don't know the words. I want to sing What a Friend We Have in Jesus, Rock of Ages, How Great Thou Art, which sometimes we do sing.
Yeah.
But I mean, I'm saying I'm completely out of water. But somehow the Lord has put me in a place where He says, Lilia, you are needed here. Not in audible voice. Every time when I think I'm not in the right place, I need to have my own. Normally in America you have a homogeneous group, when you have a Sunday school class, it's for 65 and over, it's for teenagers, it's for single moms. But somehow you all have welcomed me. I found my place and at Fairfax Bible Church. I mean, people have loved me. I mean, you and Christy, I mean, and Will, my adopted grandson.
Yeah, who lives in your house. I'm not sure people realize that, but yeah, so you met Will in our small group, and you guys developed a very special relationship to the point now, Lil, I mean, we joke that he's your adopted grandson, but he literally lives in your house.
Right. When before the time, being like I said, single mom, when I would travel to the Philippines, I would ask him and say, Will, would you kind of take care of the house? And he was the one who would make sure that the place looked secure. His insecurity, so it's secure. But so when he asked me if he could stay here, I said, well, I don't rent my house, which he knows. Only family, I have extended family coming and going. But that is a gift from the Lord also. I mean, why, how would a 33-year-old be in the same house with an 84-year-old? I mean, our worlds are far apart.
Yeah.
But we are close because our fellowship is in the Word.
Yeah.
And in our church, like you said. Yeah. And he has brought some of the young people to my house.
Yes.
Yeah. So
it is a badge of honor to go have lunch at Lilia's house.
Sometimes when I can cook. No, it's
yeah, well, I mean, it's something to laugh about, but you do have a remarkable gift for hospitality. And I've had the pleasure of being in your house, and I think it is a little bit of a rite of passage for people that are maybe come, they're new, and especially people who maybe move to Northern Virginia, where it can be hard to find connection and community. But to go into somebody's house and get a home cooked meal and be treated with so much warmth and respect, it really is a gift. It is a gift that you've honored us with, and I know so many people that have been blessed by that.
It's still part of my heritage from my parents, because I grew up with my parents always opening our home. We grew up poor, but it does not matter. We have the rice cooker. We didn't have a rice cooker then. It was just ordinary pot of rice, and we can extend it. And I've seen them welcome people. So for me, it was just so natural.
Yeah.
And also, isn't hospitality a gift from the Lord? What is that mentioned as one of our gifts? Some
Yes.
people are given hospitality. Some are teachers like you, Matt. You're a teacher.
Oh, thank you.
Pastor like Jeff. I mean, we all have different gifts.
Yeah. So I want to go back to something you said before, and you talked about how in a lot of churches in the United States and North America, we tend to sort of put people in groups. So there's the 65 and over Sunday school class, there's the youth group. We've tried not to do that at our church, and for a lot of the reasons that you just expressed. If we're recording this on February 23rd, so the next Sunday Jeff will be in Titus chapter 2 and talking about honoring older women and older men, and that relationship between older believers and younger believers, that the younger believers are in a position to learn from the older ones. That's a really, really important value in our church. You are exemplar in that, Lily, and I know that you give up something to be a part of that, but I can speak to this from experience, not only my own, but seeing it in the life of others. We benefit from having you around, to hear your wisdom, to learn from your experience. So it's a great gift to our church. And I think we're onto something here. And so when people come to and say, well, I'd really want to be in a small group with other young married couples. And my response is often, I know you think you want that, but you don't really want that. You really want to be in a mixed group where there's a little bit more diversity of age and diversity of experiences and things like that. The blessing that is waiting for you there is more than you can possibly imagine.
Thank you for saying it so well. Many times I remember with Will and I would come home. He would be driving in my other care group. I said, Will, I don't think I belong here. And he would always encourage me to say, Lilia, you have something to say. You say it, because we don't have that. And I say, but I feel like sometimes I don't even understand what people are talking about, or they speak so fast and I have to say, what did you say? But he says, just being there. I was told before by my other pastor, Lilia, being you, where you are, showing up is your ministry. Just being there already ministers to us. And sometimes I have to remind myself, because I feel like, what am I doing here? And it's a big issue, you know.
Sure.
But the other principle, Matt, is we grow in relation, not in isolation.
Yes.
And I think when we isolate a certain category group, we don't learn from each other because we have different experiences. Um, I mean, it's not my own desire to be in a group like that separate. Even the fact that I don't go to a Filipino church.
Yeah.
Okay, I could go to just a culture wise and everything, but I want to learn from. I'm here in America. I want to learn from Americans, but I don't only want to be with 84-year-old Americans. I want to learn. I mean, how would I be able to navigate this Zoom meeting and the internet? If Will is not here, says, Lilia, press that button. You do this, you do that. I said, okay. So I'm learning. It's pushing me. You say, how do you say it? Pushing the envelope?
Yeah, I say that sometimes. Yeah.
Yeah. Because it's comfortable just to be in our comfort zone. We want to be with our own kind, with, but we need to stretch. And I think that's what the Lord is telling me. Me alone, I don't like difficulty. I like to be with people who eat rice and fish and who talk like I do. But I'm learning. I mean, so many things I'm learning from you being part of the care group. And I think intergenerational. uh, I don't know if this is true, but I don't see any example in the Old Testament where they just isolate one group. There's always a family group that whenever they speak about Abraham and Isaac and all, it's always including the servants,
Yeah.
you know, the prodigal son, including, it's always intergenerational.
Yeah.
But because
you are a gift to us in that area, Lilia, and you have my deep gratitude for that. So.
Oh, thank you for saying that, Matt. But you will have to tell me when it's time for me to move on.
Oh, never, as far as I'm concerned.
my
Well, we're probably getting running up against time here. There are a million stories in the book and that Lilia could tell. So you need to, if you haven't already had dinner at Lilia's house, you need to figure out a time to go have dinner at Lilia's house. But Lilia, one of the things that I want to finish people with is, for somebody like me, I'm in my late 40s, but a lot of people in our church, 20s and 30s. One of the things that I think you have to offer is some insight on walking with God for a lifetime. Staying faithful, staying on mission, staying on target, staying intimate with the Lord for a lifetime. If you could offer maybe 2, maybe 3 thoughts on how we might do that, how we might be in a position to be in our 80s and yet still faithful and still have something to offer and still part of a community, what might those things be?
I think for me, it's to say that life is not a sprint, it's a marathon. It's a daily thing. It's not all the highs and downs of life, but it's every day. It's daily. Life is daily.
Mhm.
One, recognizing that. Two, we are not our own source of power. Philippians 2:13. For it is God who is at work in you, both to will and to do of his good pleasure. I have to remind that myself whenever I don't want to do something, or whenever something like this. Matt, I don't want to talk about me, but God says, I put this in your life. You have to recognize it's my doing, not your doing.
Yeah.
Not to claim that this is in my power. So that it's God who is at work in you, both to will and to do of his good pleasure. And to remember that God says he's the one who started the work in our lives, and he who starts good work in you will finish it to the end. It's a matter of trust. I think if every day you trust God, that today is going to be in your hand, God. Like I said, I thought I had the effect of the vaccine and I didn't want to do this. But I think part of it is I was a little scared of what you will ask me and what answers I would give. Can I do this? Do I want to be vulnerable all over again to people? And God reminded me, Lilia, it's not you. I mean, if it comes, it's because I placed it there. So the whole issue of trust and obey, I think that's the message. Even raising David up, I said, David, as long as we trust God and obey, we have nothing to worry about. Every day is trusting the Lord. It
Right.
sounds simplistic, but those are the things that come to mind.
Yeah. Well, again, the book, I'll hold it up for you if you're looking on YouTube here. It's called Lilia, My Life in the Hands of the Maker. Lilia, if somebody wanted to get a copy of this book, what do they need to do?
They just have to go to lulu.com, lulu.com.
Yeah.
It's not on Amazon yet. So, and in fact, I didn't think it was going to be this. I just wanted to write something for my great grandkids.
Mhm.
So they have something to hold on in terms of our heritage of faith from my parents, passing the baton in writing.
Yes, it's a beautiful story. You all owe it to yourselves to get one copy for yourself and read it, and then get a copy to give to somebody else, because it's a beautiful story of living faithfully for God for a lifetime. And so, Lily, you've been a blessing to me and my family. You've been a blessing to our church. Thank you so much for spending time with us today. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Matt. You are my elder. Remember, I came
Wow.
to you. I came to you when I was having a difficulty in a relationship, and you said, "What are you doing here?" And I said, "You are my elder. I need your blessing." And so I thank God for you. Each one of us has a part in the body of Christ.
Yeah.
No matter how little, how big, we are all part of the body.
Well, believe me, it works both ways, Lily. If I've been a blessing to you, you've been 2 or 3 times as much to me. So, yeah.
Thank you so much, Matt, for thinking of this.
Yeah. Thanks, everyone. We'll see you next time.
Okay, bye.
Thanks for listening to the Fairfax Bible Church Discipleship Podcast. If this episode was helpful for you, feel free to subscribe, leave a review, and share with someone else. Until next time, we pray you continue to grow as a disciple as you love Christ and live sent.